What would happen to global AI if the companies building it lost access to the chips powering it overnight? Not slowed, not disrupted, stopped. Because behind every AI breakthrough, from chatbots to military systems, sits a supply chain controlled by a handful of companies in a few critical locations. At the same time, one country leads the infrastructure, another leads the research. Both depend on a system neither fully controls. The answer is in the data, and it is not what most people think. This is Data Atlas Global, where the world's data tells the stories that headlines miss. For things are true about AI chips that most people do not know. First, the companies leading the AI boom do not control the most critical part of it. Second, the most advanced chips in the world are manufactured in a place most people cannot locate on a map. Third, the next phase of the AI race may not be decided by better models, but by who gets access to compute. And the fourth, the one that connects all of this, decisions being made right now inside governments and boardrooms could split the global AI economy in two. One system led by the United States, another built by China. And once that split happens, it may not reverse. Because infrastructure, once duplicated, rarely reconnects. But to understand any of it, we need to start with something most coverage gets completely wrong. On the surface, AI looks like a software revolution. New models appear weekly. Companies compete on features and speed. But zoom out to the data, and a completely different picture emerges. AI runs on chips, and those chips depend on one of the most complex supply chains ever built. This moment matters because AI is becoming foundational infrastructure, not just for technology companies, but for economies, militaries, and financial systems. This is not the first time the world has reorganized itself around a critical resource. In the 20th century, oil defined global power. In the 1990s, the internet reshaped communication and commerce. The pattern is always the same. The countries that control the enabling layer shape everything built on top. The countries that miss it fall behind. Today, that enabling layer is compute. The global AI chip market is projected to approach $500 billion by the early 2030s. But here is the anchor point. Around 90% of advanced AI chips depend on just 3 companies. Hold that number. It becomes important later. To understand the scale, imagine an entire global industry relying on a supply chain smaller than a single city. Geography and power no longer follow the same map. Now here is where it gets interesting. Around 90% of advanced AI chips are tied to NVIDIA, TSMC, and ASML. What makes this remarkable is not just the number itself. It is what had to happen to make it possible. Decades of specialization separated design, manufacturing, and tooling into different companies. Each became dominant in its layer, and most coverage still treats them as interchangeable. For context, no other group of companies collectively controls even 20% of this ecosystem. That gap is not competition. That is dependency. This concentration has increased significantly over the last decade, which means the system is becoming more fragile, not less. And that fragility extends far beyond technology. Now here's where it gets interesting. TSMC produces over 60% of global semiconductors and more than 90% of chips below 7 nanometers. These advanced nodes power modern AI systems. What makes this remarkable is location. Most of this production sits in Taiwan. A single geographic point supports a global digital economy. For context, the next largest producers hold significantly smaller shares at advanced nodes. That difference is not incremental. It is structural. This dominance has grown since the early 2010s as fabrication costs surged, which means fewer companies can compete at the highest level. And the implications extend into geopolitics. Because control concentrated in one region creates risk everywhere else. But the data hides something else entirely. Most analysts stop here. We will not. ASML is the only company in the world producing extreme ultraviolet lithography machines. Without these machines, leading-edge semiconductors cannot be produced. What makes this remarkable is exclusivity. ASML ships fewer than 60 EUV systems per year globally. Each machine costs over $150 million. For context, no competitor has successfully replicated this technology. That gap represents decades of engineering complexity, and it continues to widen, which means the pace of AI advancement depends on a single supplier. And that dependency extends beyond industry into national strategy. Most analysts stop here. We will not. The number that changes everything is this. The United States controls over 70% of advanced AI chip design and software ecosystems. At the same time, China produces over 30% of global AI research output. What makes this remarkable is contrast. One country leads deployment, the other leads discovery. For context, the United States has restricted China's access to advanced chips through export controls. China has responded by investing more than $150 billion into domestic semiconductor development. But Chinese firms still lag several years behind leading-edge manufacturing. That gap defines the current balance, but it may not define the future. Because if China closes that gap, the system changes fundamentally. And this is where the story takes a sharp turn. Remember that number we asked you to hold from earlier. Around 90% of advanced AI chips depend on just 3 companies. Now here is why it matters. That concentration gives control to a small group, but it also creates an incentive for others to break away. While most analysis focused on which country leads AI today, a different story was unfolding. China was building independence from this system, not matching it immediately, but recreating it step by step. This is not unusual. Major economic shifts rarely appear in headlines first. They appear in investment flows, manufacturing plans, and supply chain shifts. We watch those signals closely. What this means for the next decade is significant. The world may not converge around one AI system. It may split into 2. Countries aligning with one supply chain or the other. Companies choosing ecosystems instead of markets. And those who understand this early gain an advantage that compounds over time. So what happens if the system behind AI breaks or divides? The data gives a clear answer. AI does not stop. It fragments. The implications extend far beyond technology. When critical infrastructure concentrates, nations face a choice. Build alternatives or accept dependency. History shows most delay that decision until it becomes urgent. But by then, the gap is harder to close. And here is what makes this personal. Wherever you live, these decisions shape economic growth, job markets, and technological access. The price of services, the speed of innovation, the opportunities available in the next decade, all influenced by who controls compute. But the one question data cannot fully answer is this. Will the AI future be shared globally or divided between competing systems? What do you think? Tell us in the comments below. If this changed how you see AI, subscribe because next week we are investigating the countries most vulnerable to AI job loss. And the numbers are even more surprising. Like if you want us to go deeper. See you next week.